Well, the main news of the day, MPs still expected to vote on that EFF motion that South Africa should expel the Israeli diplomatic mission due to the conflict in Gaza this afternoon. The ANC has said it supports that motion, but with amendments. We'll bring you that vote as soon as it happens. We're not yet sure when the actual voting will happen or, as I understand it, the exact wording of the motion which will be passed. In the meantime, Professor Hennie Strydom is a Professor of Public International Law at the University of Johannesburg. He joins us now. Professor, good afternoon to you. So we have this vote. It's an important issue. Is there any precedent for this? I mean, is this an unprecedented situation where we now vote to no longer recognize a country?
Well, in general, it is not. I mean, any country has a sort of the sovereign decision-making power to decide whether it will still maintain international relations with other countries. And I think in situations of this kind, that will be one of the conditions that will be considered by a government like South Africa and probably many others. So, generally speaking, it is not. Important question, I think, that we should think about is whether that changes anything on the ground. And I think that's where the crux of the matter lies.
In other words, I suppose, to put your question another way, is it constructive? Voting to no longer recognize Israel may make us feel better, but it won't actually change anything. It also means we can't talk to them.
Yeah, it absolutely. It's a theoretical sort of exercise that's going on now. And if you break with that kind of relationship that existed for a long period of time, you lose the little bit of sort of access you still have to the other party. The other thing that we have to say to one another is that South Africa doesn't have the kind of leverage over Israel that is needed at this point in time. And exercises of this kind will not change the way Israel thinks about Gaza and the way it thinks about Palestine. And what we need for that to change, and that is really the important issue here, is that we need a unified front, sort of involving all the main role players in this conflict, to take a stance and tell Israel that it cannot go on anymore the way it has been for more than 70 years. And it's only if that happens, and I don't see any commitment to that effect at this point in time, we will only see a few variations that may occur. Say, for instance, after the war is over, that it will be more of the same with few changes here and there on both sides.
So there are other things that are going on today. Our president has been hosting that BRICS Extraordinary Summit, the Extraordinary BRICS Summit, I should call it, to discuss the situation in Gaza. You talk about a unified front. Now, sure, Russia, China, Iran, as coming in at the beginning of January, they agree with us. India does not. India seems to be very close to Israel at the moment, which again is a big change that we've seen over the last 20 years or so. Could BRICS do that, or in the end, do all conversations around Israel and influence go back to the United States?
Yes, you're quite right about that. It goes back to the United States, but also to the United Kingdom, which is, historically responsible for this mess. It also goes back to European Union countries, and also to the Arab world. So I think that's where the center is, the locus of power lies, to bring a significant change to that. I think all the other attempts are peripheral, but they may sort of contribute in a small way to changing the scenario that we've seen for so many years. But for the current situation, which has been, I think, cemented over many decades, and which is very hard to change, I think, even for Israel, because it might lose politically at the domestic front. We need the role players that I just mentioned to take a hard stance on this.
Israeli politics, of course, is moving very quickly as well, Professor, as I'm sure you know. I want to ask a bit more of a sort of a philosophical question, or maybe it's a governance question. You may find this a strange question. And I'm thinking particularly of what's happening in our parliament. Can you really manage a foreign policy as a democracy through votes in a parliament? I mean, don't get me wrong, I am a Democrat, I like democracy, it's important. But foreign policy is complex, it often has to be quite nuanced, you sometimes have to trade with people you don't like. Is it wise to conduct foreign policy according to votes in Parliament?
Yeah, foreign policy is an executive function, and that's where it should be decided and where it should be sort of acted out and sort of planned and so on. I don't think this is something that should go to Parliament to get a vote on that. Parliament's function is to exercise some kind of oversight over the activities of the executive, to see that the executive is doing his job. But foreign policy, in essence, is something that belongs with the Foreign Affairs Department.
So foreign policy belongs to the professionals, and I realize, Professor, I could make an argument against that it should be democratic. But in the end, foreign policy moves too quickly to sort of be democratic. I mean, there's a fascinating philosophical argument about this.
No, you're right. I mean, sometimes you have to take a decision in the nick of time. It's a matter of urgency, and sometimes it could be a matter of life and death, where you have to sort of intervene in some way or another. Hostage taking, for instance, is one of those, and where you need the involvement of foreign affairs to make a quick decision on this. You can't take that to Parliament and have endless debates about it and voting and so on. It defeats the object of the purpose, and so. I think it depends on the type of thing that needs to be decided, whether it is maybe something that you can take to Parliament, but not as a sort of general option when decisions have to be made at the executive level.
Professor, there's another interesting question or debate around consistency. We're saying, many of our politicians are saying, we should not recognize Israel because of the way it's treating Palestinians. It's killing Palestinians, and that, I think, objectively is true. We trade with Russia that invaded Ukraine. We sell weapons to Saudi Arabia that kills journalists and has killed thousands of people in Yemen. We have a relationship with Uganda that wants to kill gay and lesbian people. Does consistency matter?
No, you see, you're now touching upon an issue that I think also reflects on South Africa's claims to be neutral in conflicts of this kind. And you will probably recall that was the mantra that we heard almost daily in the case of the Ukraine war. And that is also the argument South Africa put forward in the General Assembly when decisions were taken on Ukraine because of the fact that the Security Council was paralyzed as a result of the Russian veto. And there's one particular important thing I think that is also come up in the case of Israel. South Africa is one of the countries which are now sort of making out a strong case for accountability for the atrocities. And I also think accountability is an extremely strong issue here and should be pursued on both sides. But when the General Assembly voted on a mechanism to gather evidence to hold Russia accountable, South Africa abstained from that resolution. Here it's a totally different story, apparently, given the fact that South Africa has come out so strongly in favor of getting the accountability process in place. And that happens frequently. So I think South Africa was unwise at the time to put forward so strongly its claims to a neutral position, because here it is not neutral at all. And there might be sort of reasons for that, but then it should explain that to everybody concerned, so that we know where we stand, and that other countries should know where they stand with regard to South Africa's foreign policy in matters of this kind.
Professor Hennie Strydom, thank you. Professor of Public International Law at the University of Johannesburg. Really do appreciate the time.